Cool.
So, hey everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to well, before I do that whole part, but basically, welcome to Zcash Podcast. I decided to have Ian on to talk about all kinds of crazy stuff this time, and a lot of perspective of like what this means and everything. And this is the last episode of the Zcash Podcast in my little grant run, and I'm going to give it a break for next year, see where we're at, and, for various reasons. But so I thought I'd just give this 1 year-long thing. So it's kind of like a cheers, and as such, I'm going to make myself a quick cocktail here real quick. You already have one, don't you, Ian?
I do. I have a terrible cocktail. I tried to go to Walmart and buy some ingredients, and it didn't work out. So I've got my terrible cocktail. But yeah, shaking it up.
Yeah.
I've also got my refill coffee glass.
What is the terrible cocktail, if you wouldn't mind explain to the fans at home?
Yeah, I'm trying to so for people who don't know, I traveled for the last year, so I gained about 20-ish pounds.
That's good.
Yeah, just drinking beer and eating pizza for an entire year. So I'm trying to lose weight right now. So when I drink, I try to just drink with like a liquor.
Yeah.
And then lemon juice.
Which, real quick interruption. This is a limoncello lemon drop. So as you can see, with some charcoal salt on the rim, so it's the yellow and the black for Zcash. It's a Zcash cocktail.
Zcashy. Cheers.
Yep, cheers. Yeah, so you've been migrating to liquor.
Yeah. I mean, I still drink beer all the time. Like I think I've had a beer like every day this week, but and maybe that's why I can't lose the 20 pounds. But no,
ice bath that stuff away.
yeah. I've just been drinking liquor, trying to drink liquor, and then like do lemon juice. I like vodka and lemon juice. I like tequila and lemon juice. So I tried today to do like a massive bourbon with a massive amount of lemon juice, and it was terrible. So I threw it out, and now I did like a shot and a half of bourbon, a shot of lemon juice. I put a shot of simple syrup in it, and then some bitters. And yeah, it's a terrible cocktail. I don't know what it is. Doesn't have a name, but it's fine.
So what'd you say is in it again? Bourbon, lemon juice, what else?
Bourbon, lemon juice, bitters, and like half a serving of simple syrup.
So that's very close to a toddy. A hot toddy is bourbon, lemon juice, simple syrup or honey or whatever, and hot water. So instead of the hot water, you just have like, I guess, ice and cold water, right? And then some bitters, and there you go. So
yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's nice. And it's hot. It's hot where I live. I don't want to disclose where I live. I mean, if you go on my Twitter, you can figure it out. But like, yeah, it's hot where I live. So
this is, I think, 2 ounces of limoncello, 1 ounce of vodka, half an ounce of lemon juice, something like that. Or maybe it's 2 vodka, 1 limoncello. But whatever, it's very lemony.
What vodka did you put in it?
I can't remember. All I know is that some vodka was gifted that comes in a bottle shaped like a skull. So it's some kind of skull vodka. But here's the thing, and this is now we're going down the celebratory booze rabbit hole here, which it's always fun to do live on air. But I enjoy vodka, I guess, but I'm not going to pay a lot of money for vodka because it tastes like nothing. And what you will find, you can buy some really cheap vodka and run it through like a Brita filter or something, and it tastes like expensive vodka. Now, it doesn't work with something like bourbon because you just strain the bourbon out of it, right? But for vodka, which is such a neutral spirit, it actually does work. So at the New Hampshire liquor stores, you can buy a handle of vodka for like $8 or $10, like a half gallon. And then you can just filter that stuff and get like really good vodka out of it. So not, I'm going to sound like such a booze head doing that. Random other side note, have you ever heard of Vin Armani? Does that name sound familiar?
No, I haven't, no.
Some people might. He was a crypto pundit who was big in the Bitcoin Cash world a few years ago, especially. And he used to have a custom, like a high-end vodka that he'd sell to clubs in Vegas for like a $500 a bottle, that kind of club vodka. And he came up to the Porcupine Freedom Festival in New Hampshire one time and he's offering to sell it for like crypto for like 150 or 200 a bot. I'm like, I wanted some because I tried some. Is the smooth? It was like water is so smooth. It's the smoothest vodka I've ever had, and that's not my thing as far as booze. But like that's dangerous stuff. Like you don't know, you don't realize how much you're having until it's too late.
Yeah, no, I think like from a boost perspective, right? If you mask it enough, like this weekend, I'm going to a friend's house, and my job is to make the liquor. I'm gonna try to like do the jungle juice with like Everclear and tequila and vodka, and just throw like a fuck ton of sugar at it. And yeah, like I'm just gonna try to mask all like the liquor.
Yeah.
And just turn. Yeah, so it's gonna be a party. It's gonna be fun. So tomorrow, if I tweet anything obscene, it's because I'm hammered off my ass partying with my friends.
That's great. Well. I have a respectful dinner tonight, but then I have 2 holiday parties over the weekend. So we'll see.
Let's do it.
We'll see.
It's going to be
All
great.
Right.
Yeah, it's a Christmas party, right? So yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a holiday season. Perfect time for boozing. But anyway, enough about booze. Let's talk about Zcash. Let me hit the intro and we'll just get into it. So, hey everyone, officially happy Friday. Welcome to the Zcash Podcast, episode number 12. That means I've done 12 months in a row, a whole year of these shows, proudly sponsored by Zcash Minor Grants. Thanks very much. Honestly, I've always been interested in Zcash, as I've said, and this podcast as a whole, I'm not like my channel, all my content stuff, has been primarily a learning vehicle for myself because I get curious about something. I invite someone on the show, I learn about it, or I decide to make an episode on something and I don't know enough, so I have to go down a rabbit hole. Like I was telling you earlier about like Bitcoin L2s and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to get deeper into Zcash, and so I thought, well, you know what? I'll have to do it right if I'm being paid for it. And so I decided to seek to get paid for it. And so I did this thing to do this year-long deep dive into Zcash. Perfect timing because of the sandblasting attack and everything, where I was getting paid Zcash and having to like navigate the realities of the world of this weirdly groundbreaking tech, this awesome, almost magic. Like Zcash's, privacy is like magic. Like, but like realize that magic comes with realize we're so early. Like people like Bitcoiners like to say how early we are. We're not that early to Bitcoin maybe, but we're to this zero knowledge tech, we are very early. And so I've had a very distinct pleasure in talking to tons of people over the course of this year, going to ZCon, going to the local meetups around me, the Zcash meetups. And yeah, it's been a fantastic learning experience. And I thought I'd sort of, wrap it up, like wrap the whole thing up by just giving an overview of what I've learned and stuff. But then I also thought, you know what? Why the hell is this all about me? It doesn't need to be all about me. We bring someone else in who knows quite a bit. And yeah. So that's where we're at.
I don't know if I'd say I know quite a bit. But yeah, I obviously from my perspective, no longer working like full time in Zcash. Still have a lot of love for the project, have a lot of love for the contributors. I have a lot of opinions as well about the future of Zcash and the various kind of roads that it could take. Like there's a lot of avenues that Zcash could take as a project. And depending on which avenue or number of avenues it takes, its legacy could kind of change or be cemented in a variety of different ways. Yeah, so I'm excited to dive into like kind of like the history and the current state and kind of what the future looks like. So I'm definitely down.
Yeah. So what I think, and I'm gonna like lead up to the Zuko clip that I'll play, and then we go into other stuff. But I think that Zcash's kind of legacy, it's like one things that makes Zcash, it's not that old of a project, all things considered, but it has this like the old roots, because I feel like there was the Bitcoin founding years which were the most amazing in crypto's history. I don't know, but it was like where everything was like on fire. Everyone's doing all kinds of cool stuff. It's like us against the world. It was a great time to be alive and involved in crypto for sure. And it was when everyone had this explosion of ideas they just wanted to do. And so almost every single, there was a time when we're finally getting to an era where there's new projects, meaning projects that did not have any kind of Bitcoin origin story, because there was no privacy on Bitcoin, and Dash got founded as Darkcoin to have that, basically an integrated coin join thing, because Bitcoin developers didn't want to do that. And then Dash ended up doing DAO and governance and other stuff. And then Decred was another governance offshoot where there's no good way of the community making decisions on how to do stuff. And so then they went to be a DAO focused kind of digital cash offshoot. And then of course you have Ethereum, famously, the most famous Bitcoin offshoot, as it were, where, Vitalik wanted to do a bunch of stuff and they're like, nah. And so then he goes and does Ethereum. And then of course Zuko, and as Zuko likes to tell, like the whole Zcash origin story being zero knowledge proofs being something talked about, by Satoshi as something that could be used to be implemented into Bitcoin's core protocol for privacy. And it's just obviously the staggering level of things that was just not implemented in L1 Bitcoin. It makes no surprise that this wasn't one of them. But then Zcash was kind of one of the more modern, what I would call Bitcoin offshoots, so to speak. And so now we're at today, where like the original thing of let's get next level privacy, make true digital cash, I guess, out of Bitcoin, kind of became the Zcash thing. Zcash was clunky for a while. Trusted setup, people hated the trusted setup, then they got rid of it and stuff. And so anyway, I'm talk about this. Play this short clip of Zuko talking about Halo.
Zcash and ECC, my team in particular, has advanced the state of the art of cryptography 3 different times in 6 years.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of that. Like,
absolutely.
Even one time would have been like a satisfying feather in my cap when I'm on my deathbed or whatever. It's not my doing. It's the team that I mainly get credit for attracting such awesome people and keeping them together. But this team, they brought zero knowledge proofs into reality at all in the first place. If they hadn't, I don't know if any zero knowledge proofs would be deployed yet today. There'd probably still be people like working on it, because it takes years and years to do that kind of thing.
Of course.
And then you were saying in 2017 or 2018 or something, you were messing with it. In 2018, this same team developed what we call Sapling, which is like Zcash 2.0, which was the first time that zero knowledge proofs worked on a smartphone.
Yeah, that's when I started to pay attention, really. I'm like, oh,
yeah, because
I didn't
you
think
no
this
longer
was
had
possible.
to get out your laptop in the command line
to
use it with Sapling. And that was like another tour de force. Like as a technologist, I swear, sometimes multiple times, like at least 3 times that I can think of, maybe 4 times just off the top of my head, some like cryptographer has come up to me and said, oh, wow, the Sapling protocol is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever read. Like the cryptographers are seriously, they really admire it. And I really admire it as a technologist. It's a fantastic like technological invention. It makes it so you can have shielded transactions on smartphones.
All right. So switching back. So anyway, you guys got the gist of that one. It might have been a little bit of a repeat. Let me see if there's any angry people in the comments being like, "Er." But anyway, yeah. So basically, the one thing with like, especially with Sapling and stuff, Zcash really broke some new ground on this, right? Where it really, advanced the state of the art of cryptography and what was kind of available. And it seems to be something that a lot of people are acknowledging, that's just like, this is something like, there's like 6 wizards out there who know kind of how to use Zcash's tech. They're kind of like around that, at least that's where it was in the beginning. And it's something that's, I think, is going to be played off of for kind of like how the Bitcoin code base was literally the base of all crypto for a very long time. and then now there's other things, and then more recently I'm seeing the name Cosmos pop up everywhere. There's like Thorchain and all its Thor children, Dash's like Data L2 is loosely Cosmos based, and they're just like Kujira's up there. There's just like so many. Isn't Namada or whatever? There's just so many things that are Cosmos based, and I know so little about Cosmos. I need to get up on that. But the point is, I think that the Zcash name is going to keep popping up for a long time to come in crypto history in the future. I don't know what you think about that.
So I think it depends on the context, right? Like, I think you have to look at Zcash as two different things. You have to look at Zcash, or three different things, more rather, two or three, because you can combine one. Mm-hmm. So you look at Zcash as the technology, and then you look at Zcash as the protocol. And I think they are two very distinct things, because when you see people, especially from other ecosystems, speak highly of Zcash, a lot of the commentary is about all of the things that it has done for the broader crypto ecosystem. The research on zero knowledge proofs, the ability to do a ZK snark proof without having to use a trusted setup ceremony, all of these different things that is developed and are now being taken and used in other ecosystems. So for example, you look at the Sapling style Zcash shielded pool, variations of that are being built across a number of blockchains that are going into production today to bring further privacy, better privacy guarantees to users. And then when you look at the newer zero knowledge proof built by ECC called Halo, that's being used across a number of projects. I was at Istanbul recently at DevConnect and had a really cool opportunity to get dinner with some folks. And as they were talking to one of the Polygon co-founders, they were talking about Halo. And I was like, I didn't know this project where I'm acquainted with one of the founders was even using Halo. And it's just like, that's like how broadly like the Zcash tech does reach into other ecosystems. My concern with that is the fact that the Zcash protocol itself has not seen a level of adoption or a level of experimentation outside of the zero knowledge, the privacy research. And I want to clarify that when I say these things, I'm talking about a general perception. I'm not necessarily even speaking my own personal opinions. It's more of this like general perception that the protocol has not accrued value because of all the benefits that it's given to the ecosystem. So I think when you look at kind of how Zcash has played out and why it's going to be around in terms of people talking about it, are they talking about the technology that's been built and has been used across other ecosystems, or are they talking about the Zcash protocol itself? Mm-hmm. So I think those are really some distinctions that, throughout this conversation we can get into, but also, in future conversations and other, mediums.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting, we have a lot of other stuff to talk about, but that seems to be the summary of this entire, maybe guessing in the future, but the summary of this whole podcast is Zcash made awesome stuff that everyone else is using, and not necessarily so much Zcash itself. And I don't think that there's a single person in Zcash who, other than maybe in the very, very early days when it's too early to tell, has been satisfied with Zcash's level of adoption relative to its level of innovation in its technology. I don't think there's a single person who's like, yeah, that's going well. I think almost everyone's like, dude, we're building the most awesome stuff in the world, and it is being used by other people, but not by our own people. Like our actual chain, our actual tech, our mainnet is kind of a testament for other chains almost. And I think that's kind of a general sentiment. Some people might be a little bit more controversial on that. Some people might be a little bit more downplaying it, but I think everyone kind of is on the same page that that's kind of the case. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think everyone agrees with that. I think there is kind of this overall disappointment. So there's a few things you have to look at there. You have to obviously look at the level of adoption can also be correlated with the amount of shielded transactions that are going on, and also like the price of the coin, right? Are people like valuing the currency and holding it and wanting to transact with it and receive it? Or is it a speculative asset, or is it an asset that, mining operations want to mine and want to receive block rewards for it, and then
or
obviously
stakers,
immediately,
maybe.
or immediately, yeah, but like in the current state, like immediately sell the coins and then buy Bitcoin with it. So I think most people would agree with that. I think the problem is trying to find ways to potentially downplay the lack of adoption for Zcash, the protocol. Maybe not even Zec specifically the asset. Obviously Zcash, for people who are not aware of this, the Zcash community does differentiate between Zcash, the protocol, and Zec, the currency, when they describe the two things. So I think it's like figuring out, okay, so what are like the avenues as a community that we want to take? What are the functionalities we want to build into the protocol? And how does that connect and interact with these other ecosystems that are seeing high levels of adoption? What are some of the avenues we can take there? I think when we try to downplay that and say things like, oh, we're going to have X, we're going to have Y, we're going to have Z, when we don't have really strong assurances on what those things are going to actually bring to the ecosystem, that kind of scares me. So I think there sometimes is this level of, I don't want to say complacency, but like a level of like, things are going to turn out all right because we did build all this really cool shit. I'd like maybe potentially to see a little bit more people being vocal about this idea of like, yeah, things aren't going well in terms of getting people to use this thing.
Well, this is something that we will go over more about how this adoption has been pushed out into other ecosystems and how it's like Zcash's innovations will live beyond our lifetimes. Like it's really like, if you wanted to make an impact on planet Earth, Zcash has done it. The question is what happens with the actual Zcash chain, the assets, the people invested in the actual, not just the theoretical proofs and all that kind of stuff, but the actual blockchain and the asset. That's a little bit of a different story. And this is kind of, I'm really addicted to this, exploring these ideas of incentives, economic incentives, and the game, the points in the game, and who acquires the points and how they acquire the points, and how that shakes out into human behavior. The praxeology, the science of human action of Austrian economics, the whole basis of that is something that if you go to like early Bitcoin people especially, is like everything. And then obviously there's other tech people into other things, but I find that super fascinating because the economy is just a giant system. It's just everyone. And the only way you get to play with economic points and rules and stuff is through government intervention, either adding more or ideally reducing it. But it's just so hard to play and see what happens. But with crypto, it's so easy because you build these systems. You just build your own global economic framework with a few lines of code and hit publish, and it's out there, and then you get to just see what happens, and it's glorious. And I think that this is going to teach people so much about what works and what doesn't in the world.
I mean, I hope so, right? Like you have two sides to it. You have one side where you do have the ability. I'm not as much of the person anymore that thinks crypto, Bitcoin, however you want to frame the ecosystem that you're working in, I'm not much of the opinion anymore that we're going to take over the global financial system. I don't think the global financial system is going to run on monies that exist outside of the state. I don't predict that future. I'm a little bit more pessimistic in that sense. I do think it gives us the opportunity to live within different black and gray markets and peacefully protest and transact with each other in a way that is peaceful, that we're not violating any specific laws. We're just kind of exiting the system, would you say, and being able to just have peer-to-peer interactions. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very interesting kind of dynamic. I like technologies that might provide those types of things. I like being able to transact with people without permission. I don't think to have those types of values, you necessarily need this like global financial system, like to be taken over by crypto. And then on the flip side of that, we do see crypto's impression in a lot of the mainstream is that we are a bunch of scammers pumping up shit coins, dumping on retail. So we have to balance like what are the actual expectations and what are the actual like utility behind these things. I'm extremely pessimistic in crypto being able to be a financial system for people who just want to peacefully protest against the state, who want to have another means to transact with people outside of the traditional mechanisms, and even do that within the laws of their own state. And I also am optimistic on it being a speculative tool for internet games and permissionless internet games. I think those are all worthwhile use cases. And I think it's just, like figuring out what your ecosystem's positioning is and what type of impact that you want to make. Because when you're selling an asset onto retail investors via centralized exchanges, like, what is your end goal? If you're allowing John Smith, who doesn't know anything about the difference between Starks, and bulletproofs, or whatever cryptography term you want to throw in there, why is he able to buy a currency and trade on that and invest in it and use it as a store of value if they don't understand all of these things, right? Like, so what's the mechanism? Like, what is the level of understanding that people need to have of these things when they interact with it? What is the purpose of interacting with it? Do you have utility for this thing without understanding what it actually does? Because people use the dollar and don't understand what the dollar is. I don't really fully understand how the dollar works, and I use it every day. So, like,
to be fair, they make it up as it goes along. But yeah,
exactly. But it's like the thing is, like, I feel like in crypto, like, we have this beautiful opportunity to create these peaceful systems, and create systems that do give us more sovereignty over our own lives and our own financial lives. But to what end is that? Are we just trying to, like, pump up a bunch of coins and, like, just dump it on retail and be like, fuck you guys for being late? Or is it like, what's the end? Like, what's the end game for each project? So it's like trying to figure out where you're trying to stand there, what your token does, and then also figuring out how you fit into a broader ecosystem, because this ecosystem is more certainly stronger as together than it is as its individual pieces.
Yeah, and I think that whole speculative thing can easily be traced back to just the origins to Bitcoin. And it's very interesting how I don't know how much of these dynamics have been intentional, but they are explicit as far as the tech we build does lead to these weird economic games that happen. So Bitcoin, obviously, Bitcoin was never a stable coin. It was just always its own thing. And that's kind of part of the thing. It's this radical departure from the current fiat scam of infinite printing and all this other kind of stuff. We'll just have our own token. And it pays itself. It's its own little economy where you buy Bitcoin, you want to send Bitcoin, you pay some Bitcoin to some miners to move it. And then that's just kind of how it worked out. And because Bitcoin was so huge, and this is something that hasn't really been, it sounds salty to even mention it almost, but most of what Bitcoin's riding on, I think Bitcoin's riding on like 20% fundamentals, 40% like first mover advantage kind of thing, and also 40% hopes and dreams of creating a completely free economic system that's not based on central banking. And so there's a lot of people that the price of Bitcoin is reflective of that last one largely, where people, it's reflective of lots of stuff. I'm not Mr. Prophet up here telling you stuff that, like, whatever. But a lot of people bought into the token. They're like, well, I can't figure out how to use it yet, but I know this is going to be big because all the hopes and dreams of this is our big shot at ending central banking. And so they buy it. And then the price goes up. And that started, and there's no blame game here, by the way. It is what happened. It started this weird cycle of crypto tokens represent an investment opportunity in a set of ideas, where now it started with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin maybe was the purest of them. But now anytime there's something cool that comes out, people run right to buying the token. Buy the token, and if it goes up, you think you've succeeded in your mission. If it goes down, that means that it didn't do what it was supposed to do. And unfortunately, Zcash got stuck in this, like literally every other crypto asset. Let's not single out Zcash here, but Zcash got in there. And I'm going to sort of steel man, I guess, the devs and everyone involved, and just say Zcash did exactly what it's supposed to do. It came in here, promised to build zero knowledge super private, cutting edge tech. They won the shit out of that. They did that so well. And people bought the token thinking that would be reflected in what happened, and it just wasn't. Mm-hmm. And it was misunderstanding of the lack of the connection between those two that is where all the whatever grief has happened since then has been this misunderstanding of we build the best bleeding edge privacy tech, and then people who bought the token will be financially rewarded for such. There was an implicit idea that was going to be the flow of course of action, and it didn't happen for, I think, retrospectively very obvious reasons, but not necessarily at the time. I don't know what you think about that.
So I think, like, again, I wasn't around when Zcash was getting spun up, but like, I think you kind of look back on it, and from my understanding of all of these things, Zcash was this idea that was presented at all these conferences, and it was like, okay, can we implement this on Bitcoin? Can we implement a payment protocol that uses this technology that's relatively new to provide more privacy to its users? And it's like, no, that's a bit risky. Build it on your own blockchain, and we'll see how that works, right? And then from what I understand is like the Zcash kind of like core founding team are like very interested in like the success of Zcash and it potentially replacing Bitcoin. That's kind of the vibe I get when I kind of look at a lot of the historical materials. I don't know if there was a certain kind of frustration that it was not implemented on Bitcoin, or I don't know what the kind of trade, like the kind of conversations that were happening there. But I get that vibe. I think the problem though is that a lot of people will say, well, it took really long to make like private transactions like available on a mobile phone, and then it took like a lot of time to make this technology usable for like everyday users, or it took a lot of time to like kind of like integrate with exchanges or whatever, and all of these kind of like narratives that are thrown at the project. I personally think like when I talk to people about Zcash, so for people who don't know, I work full time in primarily the Ethereum ecosystem, and I'm also involved on some Bitcoin stuff. And when I talk to people in these ecosystems about like my background in Zcash, there is a lot of, whether it's true or not, a lot of narratives around the project saying like, oh, this trusted setup was a really big deal, even though like every project that is like adopted Zcash tech is essentially most like 90% of them have run trusted setups.
Yeah, it's gone now. Which
I mean,
no one knows, by the way, which is hilarious.
It's gone for one of the payment pools. So the primary shielded pool still has the shielded pool that most people transact with is still relied on a improved trusted setup, just not the 6-person trusted setup. And there is a payment pool option for people that just want to interact with a trustless shielded pool, or trustless, quote unquote, right? Like, I'm not a cryptographer, so I don't want to claim something's trustless without really understanding it.
Yeah. Broad strokes.
But it didn't rely on this ceremony where people had to get together to spin out this protocol. So when I talk to people, it's like, okay, so there's this narrative around the trusted setup, and then all these people in Zcash leverage this to just have a massive amount of tokens, get a massive amount of value very, very early on because there was high amounts of inflation. It was all going to these kind of like centralized group of people, and then they just dumped it on everybody. That's what people think. I don't know if people sold it or not. I've never asked them. I haven't seen any proof of it. I've never researched it that much. I probably should have when I was working at ECC, but that's the vibe. Everyone dumped their tokens on retail. And then you have the situation of all these people getting into Zcash and very kind of like high profile investors kind of making a bet on it and it not working out. So there's that issue where a lot of people who have a lot of influence in the space and all the narratives in the space.
Yeah. And let me interject real quick on.
Go ahead.
They made a bet on it not working out. By one metric, maybe the obvious one, it absolutely did work out very well. But then by the actual metric that they hoped it would work out on, it very much did not work out. And that's the disconnect that has kind of broken a lot of things, I think.
So, but that's the issue. So are you a company that's building cryptography solutions for other blockchains, or are you a payment protocol where the currency and then the way that the tokenomics is designed is supposed to appreciate with the increase in adoption, that 20% of new issuance of coins is apparently going towards to help fund?
I would argue the thought is B, the reality is closer to A.
Exactly. So, and I'm not, again, I've gone on stage, I have said publicly, even in the last 6 months, that we should renew the dev fund more from a perspective of saying, hey, this is really interesting. Let's see if it works out. Like there's other payment protocols and there's other solutions out there that provide high levels of privacy and high levels of sovereignty that aren't Zcash, even though Zcash arguably has the best privacy technology at its core. But there are other solutions that do exist. So if this funding mechanism doesn't work out, we're not completely burned in the sense of like we can still opt into other protocols. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited for some of these newer ones coming out.
Well, why don't we hit on a couple of those real quick because they are queued up in the tabs.
They're queued up. But I think to like bring it to that, it's like, okay, so when we look at this funding mechanism and then the narratives that surround it, it's like, what is the end game? Like, what are we actually trying to do? Are we just going to continue our research, continue building out these protocols and continue building out these systems that other protocols are going to adopt? Or are we gonna make like a hard reset and say, no, we can't continue doing this. We have to figure out a way to change the direction of Zcash from a community and an actual application perspective and figure out how to kind of drive more utility and value to it and drive more usage to it, right? So it's this big question of like, if we're gonna have a group of people who are receiving money to figure this thing out, and we're gonna sell that token to retail investors, and if the demand to buy the token is higher than the demand to sell, that gives the people building on the protocol more money. Like we then need to be kind of accountable to like, okay, like we need to have people who are a part of this community and interacting with it and joining into the community and opting in. And we need to figure out like how do we make this usable for the people that are helping us and supporting us. So
I have a ton of ideas regarding that I will go into shortly. But right now, I put up Penumbra on the screen. Private trading in any crypto asset. I know Adi, who's also been on this podcast twice, love the dude, has mentioned Penumbra specifically. Do you want to just give me a quick real rundown on Penumbra from your point of view?
Want me to give me a rundown?
Or what do you know about it?
I actually don't. I know I've met the founder a few times. Very nice person. Used to work at the Zcash Foundation. I follow some of their team members on Twitter. I participated in the trusted setup recently. I've unsuccessfully participated a few times. My Wi-Fi would shut off when I was trying to get my when I was participating, my Wi-Fi would shut off and I would have to spin up the whole thing again. And after 7
random
times.
Interjection, I did participate in one trusted setup. It was for Railgun. It was only a it was a ceremonial only. Like it wasn't
okay.
I don't think I cannot at all compromise anything of Railgun. I think it's just purely for ceremonial purposes. But I did participate. So thank you guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So a lot of people, it was really recent for Penumbra. So from a very high level understanding, I actually listened to a talk last night on Penumbra. So I'll try to try to say what it is. It originally, I think, was designed to provide like a privacy preserving trading platform. So being able to do these types of like on-chain swaps and on-chain decentralized finance interactions in a privacy preserving way in a Zcash style shielded pool. From my understanding of the protocol now, it's a protocol that enables private swaps, private transfers, so like peer-to-peer spends. It's a multi-asset shielded pool, so you can have numerous asset types in the Penumbra shielded pool, and it also does things like private governance and things of that nature. So it's kind of like this very all-encompassing solution. I don't know very much about the technology that's backing it. I understand it's built on Comet BFT, or it's like a Tendermint-like consensus mechanism. It's a part of the Cosmos ecosystem. So yeah, proof of stake, like it when I look at something like Penumbra or even Namada, I kind of, even though not knowing too much about the projects, I kind of see that as like the future a lot of Zcashers want to go and be kind of like very kind of like akin to those projects. So yeah, that's what I know about Penumbra. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No problem. I mean, it's good. So now let's switch over to this next one, Aztec network, which I have to say, there's so many freaking Aztecs out there. Like the Maya protocol has an Aztec chain coming out that uses its native asset cacao to do smart contracts and all that kind of stuff. and not in a ZK way at all. So there's a couple different, there's more than a few Aztecs running around, which for those who don't know, the Aztec Empire, the Mesoamerican, whatever, there's no actual Aztec people. There's a collection of people. It's like a, kind of like U.S. is not an ethnicity. And the language was not Aztec. It was Nahuatl that they spoke. But anyway, random dumb factoid no one cares about. Please go on.
Yeah. So Aztec is, again, I'm really sorry. And I'm sorry to some of the people I know at Aztec for butchering this.
Well, the point about this is just to briefly talk about a few of these cool things that are being built using Zcash tech. It's not like this. So this is not sponsored by any of these things. So I'm not gonna have to give anyone a refund for this.
I've become very the more and more I get involved in crypto. A quick caveat: the reason I'm very hesitant. The more and more I become involved in crypto and become more educated and learn about this stuff, I figure out the less I know and the less I actually know about how any of these systems work.
This is the way.
But Aztec is an Ethereum layer 2, so it's this type of off-chain. Yeah,
How many times has that pitch been given by a project?
It is, I think, 50. I think there's 50. If you go to l2beat.com, I think there's 50.
Wow. Okay.
So Ethereum layer 2s are essentially stripped down blockchains that focus on execution. So they're taking the execution aspect of Ethereum and they're doing it in another on-chain, another protocol that's off the Ethereum layer 1 to essentially increase throughput and increase functionality that the EVM might not offer in order to scale or in order to provide new ways for developers to build applications. Kind of what a layer 2 is. With Aztec, their focus originally was building some type of system. From my understanding, I wasn't very familiar with the Aztec Connect design, but from what I understood, it was a system that was very similar. It's like a Zcash sapling style shielded pool, but they were trying to add programmability into the shielded pool. I'm not sure if that was the direction they were going. They sunsetted that for a number of reasons, and now they're building a layer 2 that allows developers to go in and build different types of applications that are either in public or private state, and also enabling users to have transactions that are public or private. So giving kind of users the option to transact with each other in a private manner, giving developers a way to have more private computation versus just entirely in Ethereum, obviously everything's entirely public. So providing two different options within a flexible environment. I also understand they're building a new programming language that allows kind of developers with experience in certain programming languages to write in ZK without having to actually know how to write a ZK circuit. So that's my understanding of Aztec. And if for a lot of the shit that Ethereum layer 2s get for decentralization, Aztec is leading the way in decentralizing the protocol. So if you're interested in layer 2 scaling and decentralization, I'd say Aztec is probably the protocol to really follow in terms of the ways they're going about that.
Now let's hit on Namada. Namada, it's a tagline. Asset agnostic. I don't know. I can't read it from here. A new era of privacy and multi-chain interactions. All right, go ahead. I want you to know about Namada.
So what I know about Namada is a protocol that's built on a sapling like Zcash shielded pool. It enables being able to shield multiple asset types. It's very integrated into the Cosmos ecosystem. I guess a great way to explain an interaction with Namada is that you can have a token in Namada in the shielded pool. You can gain a high level of anonymity because the token is not strictly, the shielded pool is not constrained to one token. So for example, to have a shielded interaction in Zcash, you have to have the shielded Zcash token Zec. In Namada, you can have any number of tokens. I understand they're building a bridge with Ethereum. They're building connections with a number of other chains across the Cosmos ecosystem. And that provides a high level of privacy because even if you want to do some type of DeFi interaction, if you hold your asset in the shielded pool and then you leave the shielded pool, make it public, have a DeFi interaction and come back into the shielded pool. While the transaction of a swap, for example, is public, your store of value and where you're keeping your money is in a shielded pool and is private. So you have higher level of anonymity. I've written about that in the past, that if you want to do things between public and private public and private kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a public balance and a private balance. Yeah, public balance and private balance. The best way to interact between those two is going private, public, private versus public, private, public. Because if your start state and end state is always in the private balance, and you're not sending the full amount of your funds there and back every time, and you have it's like spending digital cash. So I think that's, from my understanding, their design. And they've done a lot of cool things with the Zcash community. They want to do an airdrop to Zcash users. They retroactively funded Zcash projects, whether you're a developer on Zcash or a community educator through decentralized Zcash education systems. So really cool project. Really excited to see how they play out as well. So yeah.
And the final one, which is the spicy one, which it's not just unidirectionally spicy, it's bidirectionally spicy. This is something from the Monero Project Research Lab from Seth for Privacy, who's also been on the podcast. Hi, Seth. Saying, exploring trustless ZK snarks for Monero's payment protocol, number 100. And so, yes, I've seen this before. So rather than me yabber on about it, why don't you go ahead and do it?
So the idea is that within Monero, from my understanding, there is a part of the Monero payment protocol that can sometimes cause a privacy leak. It's called ring signatures. So this idea of taking your address and mixing it amongst a number of other addresses. Did I explain that correctly? Right? The idea of mixing. Yeah. So the idea with Monero is that you can replace that aspect of the payment protocol with something like Halo that doesn't require a trusted setup. That is a huge thing with the Monero community. They don't want to interact with privacy protocols that have trusted setups. So you can have this type of proof that can replace ring signatures and take away that privacy leak, making the Monero payment protocol a lot more, I'd say, bulletproof and privately
nice.
Sound. Yeah, nice. Bulletproof.
Nice.
Yeah. I work with the person who actually wrote that paper, so cool. I'll tell them about that. but you can make it more bulletproof in that sense, and you can make it more stronger in terms of the privacy set, and you can kind of wipe away the entire argument against using Monero. The thing about that makes it so interesting is that Zcash and Monero don't like each other. And a lot of people in the communities have been kind of at each other's throats for a while. I am one of the people who, as a person who worked on Zcash full time, I would consider myself not necessarily a member of the Monero online community, but I am definitely a Monero user. I've had a lot of pleasant interactions with the Monero community. I've never had similar interactions to what you have had, fortunately, in the past.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm a fan of Monero today, and I'm a fan of a lot of people in Monero today. And there's a historical thing, which, again, communities are made up of people, right? And technologies are agnostic. Early days Monero, especially, had a lot of weird criminal elements. I'm not just saying about virtue signaling about drug law kind of criminal. I mean literal criminals, actual criminal elements. Had a lot of really toxic people, a lot of like they used to send people to they attacked the Dash community first, which is where I kind of got into that, and literally sent people to meetups. There was a Dash presentation and then handed out flyers to everyone in the crowd saying Dash is a scam. And so literally weird, super weird antisocial stuff. And they moved on from Dash and went on to Zcash. They kind of never went off of Zcash. But since then, that segment of the Monero community, which used to be 80% or something overwhelming, is now shrunken down to just there's a sliver. And the rest of the reasonable people, I would call Seth as one of these people who's reasonable, maybe still have some kind of biases informed by that segment, but they're otherwise good people. And I think that, my personal opinion, again, this is just my personal opinion, I think that Zcash should celebrate that its tech is influencing the one thing that Monero cares most about, which is privacy. And vice versa. I think that Monero should be round of applause for the devs that came out with a Halo protocol. Round of applause for ECC. This is good stuff. I do think that there should be this is the state of the art is being moved forward in some really meaningful ways that are affecting real people, and I think that's a beautiful thing and should be celebrated. That's my personal opinion.
So I completely agree with you, but I think so. The reason, for context, the reason we're showing these projects is because we're talking about like the legacy of Zcash.
Yeah.
And the reason I brought up these examples, and there's a lot more, but the reason these were top of mind for me is that, like, if Zcash says it's going to be this thing, and it ends up being something where all of the technology is then baked into other protocols, but the people who interacted with the ecosystem, who weren't benefiting from the 20% issuance of new coins directly, right? We have essentially burned an entire segment of the crypto community, these people called Zodlers. And we've sold them a dream from a marketing perspective. I am guilty in participating in Zcash marketing. Like, I get it, but like, so criticize me if you want. But selling a dream of this future end state, but the only realistic mechanism of Zcash is just supplying development shops and then branching the technology out into other chains.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's where it's ended up today, at least.
But I don't think that has to be the end state. I don't think Zcash has to essentially tolerate the current state, and I don't think it has to tolerate a lot of the, for lack of a better term, lack of activity currently in the forums, kind of a lot of the shenanigans that went on at ZCon that were to be completely candid, a bit ridiculous in terms of on-stage arguments and very, very visible discontent between a lot of the teams. And as a community member, and as someone who previously contributed to Zcash, you feel very discouraged about kind of this end state. You're very happy to have contributed to something that, as you mentioned, did contribute to the greater good of the world. I think everyone who's contributed specifically to Zcash code can hang their hat and say they changed the world, because they absolutely 100% did.
Absolutely.
And their legacies are going to be able to live on in this industry forever. But in terms of the future of the protocol and the legacy it leaves on the industry, I don't want Zcash to just be a thing that was an R&D shop for other protocols while burning retail investors because we told them that buying on centralized exchanges was the best way to interact with Zcash. I don't think that is an acceptable trade-off for someone who is less technical and as a community member wants to see more utility and more use cases for the protocol. So
yeah,
for context,
which, by the way, to be fair, so from my personal perspective, I have never told people to get on a centralized exchange and buy any token except in the context of they wanted to use it for a very specific purpose. And is this something that and this is where we've got to be careful, because as I mentioned before, the whole thing when people bought Bitcoin to invest in a central bankless world, even though that wasn't, that they kind of did that. And my point is they've tried to do that with Zcash as well, buy the ZEC token to invest in the future of this technology. But I guess my question is, has there ever been an explicit connection? There has been an implicit based on past connection.
It's completely implicit, but it's definitely like the reason the term Zodler exists is because you believe the price of Zcash is going to increase because of the efforts of the development teams who are receiving 20% of newly issued coins. That is a fact. That is, and if anyone wants to argue with me on that, like, take me to Twitter. I'll defend that position.
Well, it's great because we're on Twitter right now, and
I will defend that. And I have said, and I said this at CCon before, I said that is a horrible, horrible thing to advocate for.
Yeah. Now the question, the nitpick on that a little bit more, because whenever you say spicy things, you always have to be correct, right? Is whose response is, where did the implicit contract come from? Did it come from just Bitcoin set the precedent and then people are just copying its homework? Or did it come from an explicit decision to do implicit marketing of the ZEC token? As in, was it just, we're gonna do the Bitcoin thing but with privacy, and then it was a carryover inherited implicit thing? Or do you think it was an actual, like the people in charge or whatever kind of consciously chose to propagate this implicit connection between buying the token and the token performance and the development team's kind of work.
It's definitely implicit. I don't think there's anything, at least when I worked on it, there was never anything that's like buy our token. Like it's not, that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah,
because that's not true.
Sorry to interject one last time here for an analogy. Is it like, is this like a hereditary? Is it kind of like, well, my parents always did it this way, so I'm just doing the only way I know how? Or is it something else where it's like, I am starting anew, this guilt tripping or whatever you want to call it?
It's something else.
Okay.
So it's something else entirely. Yeah. So here's
I have no opinion on the matter, by the way. That's why I'm asking.
So I have a very strong hypocritical opinion. So yell at me on Twitter. It's fine. Fine. I don't care. The opinion is that, and again, whether this is technically true or not, I said this in a forum post recently, does not matter because this is what people think. So this is the implicit idea, right? So there's two sides to this. The first side is that there is a development team building a more private version of Bitcoin. And the marketing materials that are being put out about this private version of Bitcoin is that it is providing more security. It is a better version of Bitcoin. It's fulfilling the true vision. And that if you interact with Bitcoin, there is a potential danger to using that. There's a potential end state to where you could be kidnapped or killed or whatever. And it's like,
all of those things, by the way, are arguably true, although the last bit is I personally believe it might have been played up a little more than it should be. It is very true theoretically of if you don't have robust privacy, there's a lot of bad things that could happen in certain contexts. But I do think it was prematurely pushed as how severe is this to the person today.
But what is robust privacy? Is robust privacy buying Zcash on an exchange and moving it to a shielded wallet where your counterparty is a centralized intermediary that has to answer to the hand of the US government, and they know every single amount of Zcash that you've ever bought, and they know your address and they know your driver's license picture? Or is it going to a Bitcoin meetup on a pseudonym wearing a COVID mask and sunglasses and buying some Bitcoin non-KYC?
Like such a dweeb. But like no disrespect, but I've seen people like that. It's hilarious to me.
But like what's more private? Because on one chain you're being completely surveilled by chain analysis companies, theoretically, and you can do some privacy techniques that improve that. And in the other chain, you're completely shielded, but the US government and centralized exchanges know your entire balance. So like by saying things like, oh, it doesn't matter if you use an exchange, it doesn't matter because the shielded, like, again, like, are we being honest or dishonest? I think that is a dishonest and stretching the truth type argument. So the issue is when you have these types of marketing materials, I've put them out. I've done it. I've done it. I've done it. I'm sorry. I've clicked tweet on some of these things. And some of them are pretty fucking good. They're pretty funny.
I do like the content you put out.
But the idea is that in that scenario, we are selling a dream to people. And these people are interacting with the protocol by buying it and holding it and hoping that some return happens in the future. When the core value of the protocol and its usage is interacting in kind of like peer-to-peer private economies. Those two kind of that onboarding mechanism and the mechanism in which people are supposed to use it are vastly different. So we have to look at the use cases for what people are actually using currencies on the internet in these cryptocurrency protocols. And how are they interacting with these on-chain protocols today if they're coming through the onboarding process that we're expecting the majority of Zcash users to come through? And then we have to take the protocol and the protocols that it's interactive with and it's integrated with, and we have to bring the protocol to the user, and we have to make the protocol and the currency and the applications more useful to people. How do we do that? There's a number of different ways to do that. I'm happy to talk about some of them.
Well, but before we get into that, there is something funny, which it's kind of, I like getting the feeling we're getting somewhere, because when we get somewhere, you always have these like, you have to have a little bit of pushback in some cases. So we already got some pushback live on this show, which is great. Let me throw that up on the screen. If you're following your Twitter notifications, you should see it anyway. But so there's a link from the Zcash Foundation to the Zcash Community Grants Candidate Call. And then this random person on Twitter's Twitter, right? Quote tweeted our podcast says, meanwhile, both Ian Sagstetter and Joel Valenzuela are currently shilling other projects on Zodlers Zats. Abandon all funding. So, first of all, I should make a few things clear. I have not shilled a single project. Neither have you.
That's not true. I've shilled Zcash.
No, but not on
not,
this.
not,
on this
not,
show.
Not today.
On this show, we've not shilled a single thing. We are talking about, in fact, the only reason we put up these extra projects is to build up Zcash. It's the legacy. This is the awesome stuff that has happened, that has gotten out there. And so also, I never signed up to do a podcast that just tells people, as you mentioned, to just buy Zcash and then on a centralized exchange and
don't buy it.
Like, I never did that either. I came to educate people about this stuff. But I'm very sympathetic to this, would seem like a troll kind of, but this, what is a clearly frustrated investor who has bought, who's participated in this flow as you described it, is not liking how things have turned out and is finding things to blame. And it's like, oh, these people on this podcast are talking about ways in which Zcash's technology is being used outside of Zcash's ecosystem. If we somehow stop people like this from talking about it, that will fix the problem, and people will instead talk about Zcash only, and therefore the price will go up. It's just kind of like I'm straw manning maybe, but that's sort of the thought process.
I'd say let's remove the price, right? Because like as someone, I am very active in the space, and kind of working in the space full time, and I mean active in the sense that like most of my time every day is spent on working on either my job, which is with a project building in the Ethereum space, or it's doing education pieces on taking Ethereum style technology and applying it to Bitcoin. So in my time, the majority of time I spend every day is on this space. So like when I'm thinking about this stuff, the price of the coin is very, very, I don't check prices as much as I would say, like I don't wake up in the morning and check the price. I check the price if I'm on Twitter and everyone's like, oh shit, who dumped, or oh shit, who's buying, right? Like I'll be like, oh, what's the price? But like, I don't really check it much. And I think that's just a consequence of like, when you kind of immerse yourself in the technology and you have like these ideas of like, oh, what this could do. It's like, okay, cool. Like there's a potential end game. Candidly, I also am being paid to work on this stuff. So it's a lot easier for me to like be interactive and kind of understand, like I know about new protocols when they're coming up, just because like I see them on Twitter because I'm on Twitter all the time.
And let me hit on that thing too. Yeah. The reason you're being paid is because someone has money to pay you. The reason they have money to pay you is because they either are making money doing this kind of stuff through real customers, or they have a credible pitch to investors that they will make money doing this in the future, and therefore this is instrumental.
Exactly. So
that's very important to this whole thing.
So I think the idea with like Zcash, right, is like I want a future where community members are like I would love to ask this, like how much the contributing team to Zec Hub and Zcash Brazil and these people check the price of the token. I'm sure they do. Everyone does. Who says they don't? Liar. Like maybe like 10 people, like 0.1% of people. Most people have checked the price in the last 60 days. So I'd be interested as well to see how much people think about that. But the idea is like, strip this price talk away. Strip that, like, how can we bring the protocol to people where they're at? So we've discussed this argument of like the peer-to-peer economic systems that are existing via crypto primarily, you're going to disagree with me on this, primarily exist through Bitcoin and Monero, and then potential offshoots of Bitcoin, such as like Bitcoin Cash, Dash, and other protocols that are very much involved in like that
digital cash space,
traditional cash space, right? And Zcash is supposed to be there, but for whatever reason, it's not always there. So a lot of people in Zcash, like a lot of the technology has been abstracted away to Cosmos and Ethereum and these different ecosystems. And now even Bitcoin is looking at, using things like validity rollups and zero knowledge rollups. So how do you take the protocol to where a lot of the builders have gone and a lot of the users, like a lot of Zcash users, are very involved with Cosmos now because of Namada, and they'll be interested in Penumbra. How do you bring Zcash to those ecosystems? How do you bring the protocol and the currency, and how do you make it useful within a broader ecosystem context?
And not zero knowledge tech, but Zcash very specifically.
Yeah, the block, like the actual protocol and the currency backing the protocol. So I have some ideas. Happy to share them.
Okay, well, I have some ideas too, and we'll probably, I guess, spend the next like 15 minutes, half an hour on that. But cool. One thing that's kind of fun to see with this whole thing is Zcash tech is one thing, and then Zcash the blockchain is another. And it seems like the Zcash tech, again, we've demonstrated over the course of this podcast for shilling other projects on Zodler, Zats, whatever they want to call it. We've demonstrated there's immense value in what has been built at the protocol level for Zcash. There's immense value 100%. Because it keeps being, everyone's just snatching it up like hotcakes. It's just everywhere. It's clearly, and they're just not like, no offense to other things, but like the era of like, no one's building new CoinJoin stuff. Like that had its time. It's kind of over. Very little like ring signatures. Like, oh, let's do more of that. Like Mimblewimble kind of like came and went, and then had a resurgence with Litecoin. But it's not the state of the art. Like people aren't going to any of these. They're going to Zcash tech, and that is a fantastic endorsement. Now, what they're not going to is the Zcash chain, and I think that So first off, there's two things going on here. One, there is a sort of misunderstanding. There's an understanding, a false understanding, that the awesome tech will lead to usage on the chain, that the primary beneficiary, as they would have thought, of that awesome tech, which is the chain of Zcash and the token ZEC. There's that understanding which has not panned out, and therefore you have a fork in the road. Like as Yogi Berra famously said, when you reach a fork in the road, take it. Right? There's a couple of ways you could go. And there's actually a third way, which is a mix of the two, right? One is you can figure out why the end user product of this awesome tech is just not being taken to market in the correct way, and you can solve that. And there's a few things you can do there. You can be like, all right, like spend before sync, that should have been done a while ago. The wallets are broken. Okay, we fixed those. Stuff like that. Oh, we need to fund a team of actual onboarders who know how to not only get this digital cash into every single payment processor, every single company, whatever it takes, and then start going and getting people to download a wallet that lets them spend this. And like, you need to, or however it works out, you got to start making Zcash cash, like make that work out. That's avenue number one. Why don't you give some thoughts on avenue number one on that?
The idea of Zcash being digital cash is not what the market wants. The market, in terms of the market that Zcash, the protocol, is projecting itself on towards. Like you have to think, Monero. Why do you need digital cash? Why do you need private digital cash? Mm-hmm. Like why do most people need it? What are the use cases that you would not want to use your checking account? So you have personal sovereignty, like I would say aligned with like anarcho-capitalist, anarchist, or libertarian ideologies, where you just don't want to interact with the central banking system and be surveilled. And then there's other reasons. What are the other reasons? Why did a lot of people get introduced into Bitcoin? So you have this idea of like, what is peer-to-peer cash actually for? It's for and permissive to use in any way that you want. But what are the use cases, and what are the people that are adopting peer-to-peer cash, peer-to-peer digital cash? And if you as a protocol are not embracing the ecosystem that is very clearly interested in very either ideological arguments or very like different use cases that might not be very appeasable in the public eye. I'll give you one. I think when Roe versus Wade happened, the issue with like abortions last year in the United States, that was a perfect example for Zcash to build out an application and an SDK of some sort for other developers and other ecosystems to find out a way to fund abortion payments. Personally, if I was in that situation, due to partly because of my religious background and just my view on the world, I would never want to be in that situation of having to make that decision. That's my personal opinion. But I also don't think it's the government's right to take that decision away from someone. So what do we need to do as a community? We need to fund and figure out ways, not maybe fund, but figure out ways to build applications for those use cases.
Yeah.
So I want to finish. Like, there's another point to this. So there's that digital cash, edgy privacy use case that one day might take over the world in terms of all-time ultimate surveillance Orwellian states, or we can build protocols that are capable of doing that for the use cases that we all think are very, very, very valuable. Human rights activists, abortion payments, buying things that are outlawed against a tyrannical state, etc. Or we can meet people where they are and design the protocol in a way that it's integrated and allows Zcash to interact with these other blockchains and these other applications, but still maintain the ethos and the functionality to still provide that use case of digital cash while also being integrated and connected with an internet economy. I don't think you have to trade off digital cash for connection to the broader ecosystem of blockchains and applications that are happening on Ethereum, Cosmos, Celestia, Solana, etc. I don't think you have to make the trade-off explicitly. I think there's a lot of gray area, and there's definitely trade-offs in designing protocols one way or the other, but I think you can have both use cases available to people who want to use Zcash.
Yeah. So here's just like a random idea of bridging the digital cash use case with the serve the needs of the market use case. Well, first of all, just on the digital cash, as you mentioned, there's some other things. For example, there's a lot of there's like the adult industry, there's the firearms industry, there's so many. Used to be the cannabis. Oh, you're muted.
I was saying, sorry,
yes.
great use case. Like, I would love in a situation where I was a single man, I would love to buy porn with Zcash. I think that's a perfect use case. I think buying guns with Zcash is a perfect use case. I'm wearing a Guns and Bitcoin t-shirt right now.
Fantastic.
Like, guns and Zcash is fucking awesome, right? Like, 100% agree. Yeah,
so there's all these kinds of like product market fit type things for a super anonymous digital cash. And I mean, there are some, it's kind of like the Monero wheelhouse. There are some concerns over Monero's like privacy model that, I mean, let's be super freaking honest, like only like very like this is like super like the CIA's after you kind of stuff, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like it works pretty well. It's only like very edge case things like, oh no, but what if like someone was running had one of these other signatures or whatever. Not going to go down that rabbit hole, but the point is, if someone's like super paranoid and wants to do something like that, they would opt for like the zero knowledge approach, for example. So there's a way of like leaning into that kind of use case and just being like, look, we're going to take Zcash as it is, but make it super easy to use, effective, and just push it so much into these super cypherpunk, super like, whatever, like make it succeed as that. And just all we do because we've already built the best privacy protocol in the world so far. Why don't we like just focus on product? This is just like, if this is digital cash, let's focus on that. There's another way of doing that, by the way, which doesn't involve that, which what if you made a great, bridging protocol, let's just say, and then now you have the best stablecoins in the world running on the Zcash network, paying Zcash, ZEC, and gas to do, and a Bitcoin stablecoin. Because right now, if you want to use Bitcoin, you're using dumb liquid and a bunch of like, there's a bunch of stuff, not to be too controversial yet, but like there's people want to use Bitcoin, and Lightning just has not panned out for the market. Liquid is being pushed as next thing. I don't think that's going to pan out either. The point is, what if there was a way where people could trust using Z Bitcoin, right? Where it was basically, it had all the user experience awesomeness of the ideal situation. Let's say Zcash shielded stuff, had all the perfect privacy, or whatever you call it, like very good privacy, like almost great, almost perfect privacy. You get all that, but you get to transact in the unit of count of Bitcoin, and you got to trust that that peg was not going to be screwed up by a centralized party or a hack or whatever. If people could trust that, that's a massive valuation. What if then you have hundreds of thousands of transactions going through the Zcash network, if not millions, that people are sending Bitcoin privately via Zcash? All those fees, transaction fees, go to, let's just say stakers, because they're moving towards proof of stake. Therefore, now you have an incentive to buy the token SEC, because you have to stake in order to facilitate all this, and you're getting paid by Bitcoiners to do this. That's a great product market fit, right? So if you want to go in that digital cash direction, there's just let's push ZEC as a end user currency, which is a tall order, but you can do it. Or let's do these other things, but let's just focus on that digital cash use case and actually turn this around and not just expect the technology itself to do all the talking for everyone. So that's one avenue.
There's a couple open questions there, right? Like,
there's a lot. This is a rabbit hole, man.
I think so. My preference, I'll be posting something in the forum in the next few weeks. Mm-hmm. I'll give a sneak peek of it here. So I'm questioning whether Zcash needs to be, and this is the controversial take. I don't think Zcash needs to be a layer 1 blockchain.
Yeah,
I think so let me kind of explain of why I think that. So when you look, and this is a very simple explanation, but if you look at a blockchain, it does like 5 or 6 things. So in Zcash, a user submits a transaction, they generate a proof, they send that transaction, it's picked up by a miner in a proof of stake world, it's picked up by a block producer, the block is ordered and created, it's produced, it's broadcasted to the network of nodes. They validate the transaction. They say that block is good, and they include it in the chain. So like, kind of simple explanation. So like, in the industry that I work in, and kind of my opinion, there's 2 approaches you could take here. You could keep Zcash of that style, and you could make modifications to the layer 1 blockchain to increase throughput, to increase the amount of transactions that individual blocks can take, and you can make it potentially harder to run a node. But if you go into the Cosmos ecosystem, I think the node count is already it's only 200. I don't think you're allowed to via using something like Common BFT or Tendermint. I don't think you can scale past 200, 300 nodes anyways. But even in a future state, increasing the capacity of transactions on the layer 1 will limit you in terms of the amount of people that can run nodes. Now, can it be permissionless? Of course. But are everyday people going to be able to run their own node? Probably not. Even today, most people don't run their own Bitcoin or Ethereum node. So what is running your own node a part of a Bitcoin type of mind virus, right? Where people think that you think it is. I disagree. That's a disagreement we have. But again, that is an argument.
I do run my own node. Despite that, I do run my own node. Over Tor.
Well done. So I think with that, you have an argument of we can just keep the layer 1 blockchain. We can increase throughput. We can increase kind of the capacity of the chain to process more transactions in a given amount of time. And we can maybe centralize block production a bit more. But if you look at Zcash right now, block production is already a bit centralized. So it's we can make that trade-off. Mm-hmm. Or you can have Zcash be a protocol that only handles what we could potentially say the execution of shielded transactions. Shielded, it maintains an environment that enables users to have a shielded store of value, and also enables an execution environment that allows other currencies to move, like the Namada or Penumbra model of having a multi-asset shielded pool, which is very akin to the Zcash shielded asset grant. And if you allow the protocol in development to solely focus on that execution environment and maintain kind of all of the functionality there and solely build on that, you can kind of outsource these other aspects of the blockchain to essentially other consensus protocols that are decentralized to handle the other parts of that transaction journey that we just talked about. So in that kind of argument, I think is potentially a way to, one, within these designs, you can improve interoperability, you can improve user experience, you can improve the capacity of Zcash and its payment protocol or shielded asset protocol to process transactions. You can use the ZEC token in a way to secure consensus protocols within either the block production environment or whether it's the prover environment, etc., to give value to the Zcash token, or not value, but utility to the Zcash token. You can have that environment pay fees in ZEC. You can still so from a user perspective, you're not doing anything. You're literally keeping the same type of user experience, but you're integrating with other consensus protocols that make design trade-offs to be very efficient and other mechanisms, while Zcash makes the trade-off to be very efficient at private transactions.
So basically, on a technical sense, it's not scrapping the L1, but kind of in an adoption sense, it's sort of repurposing it as Zodlers now are the investors in all these different privacy protocols using Zcash's tech, and the token is used as kind of a way to secure these kinds of things, and then they kind of get paid from people using other chains and other things. Is that kind of the vision, sort of?
Yeah. So let's say for example, Zcash becomes this off-chain protocol. And let's just use Ethereum, for example. I think Ethereum might not be the best example because Ethereum does have 72 or 73% of its blocks being censored, or not including transactions that have been sanctioned by an American government organization.
Let me see.
Let's just say Ethereum.
Yeah, keep going.
So if you, for example, say, okay,
35% is enforced OFAC compliance right now.
35, that's it?
Yeah, it's gone down. It used to be a lot higher. Yeah, it's taken.
It was 72 last week.
Well, let me I know it's a little bit off-roading here, but I'm going to put it up on the screen real quick. mevwatch.info.
Yeah, that's the website.
Yeah, post-merge OFAC compliant blocks. OFAC compliant is 35% enforced, according to MEV Watch right now. Again, that's just the source we're using. Better than it could have been. And if we scroll down, just from a purely academic perspective, then you scroll down, you see it got really high, like 73% in November of last year. And then it took a dive and is kind of on its way out a little bit.
I thought it was a lot higher.
Maybe it was 73% non-compliant, and that's kind of what showed up. But either way,
nonetheless,
yes.
Let's say that's a fear, right? And this Zcash execution environment, when it proposes transactions and blocks or updated state to Ethereum, Ethereum's we're not accepting this, and then Zcash is kind of in a way potentially screwed. Let's say all of the validators are we're not accepting Zcash state updates or whatever. So that's a fear. But if you can have a system that's sufficiently decentralized enough to where you can post, you can have Zcash do all of these transactions and computation, you can send it to another layer where the block production happens. Zcash wouldn't necessarily be Zcash could create a consensus protocol to be responsible for block production, or it could opt into another one. It sends off the block. That block can be produced very quickly depending on the consensus protocol it uses, and then it's sent to another network, or even potentially the same network that takes all these blocks, executes the transactions, and then creates a proof saying that the execution was done correctly, and then sends that update to the layer one. Then the layer one is able to kind of broadcast that state and say, and then other people can go to the layer one and say, hey, can I read the state of the Zcash execution environment? Can I see that it's valid? And you'll be able to do that because you'll be able to read all these proofs that say all the computation was done correctly. So in that kind of environment, I think it's super interesting to have Zcash solely focus on execution and focus on the functionality that it can provide to users. In that kind of system, you can build on different stacks. You can build within different ecosystems that can have your specific blockchain interoperate with these other ecosystems and have more ability to do cross-chain transactions, cross-chain swaps. People can move their asset, let's say it's ETH, into Zcash shielded pool, and then move it out when they need to. They can use Zcash as a store of value. They can use Zcash as a payment system, etc. You're just making it more integrated with another ecosystem. The other direction is to increase potentially in the future the amount of transactions the Zcash layer 1 can handle and potentially integrate with something like Cosmos. That is a completely other valid approach. I understand that Halo 2, if you implement recursion, has some scaling benefits because it's like you can scale proofs on proofs on proofs on proofs. Mm-hmm. So I understand that might have some scaling benefits. I don't know, but I've heard that before. So like there's a ton of design trade-offs, but I think ultimately you want the system to be able to provide the private value that's providing right now in terms of peer-to-peer transactions and store of value, but also to be able to interact with this new economy of people that are like doing DeFi or flipping shitcoins or buying NFTs, but giving people the choice to interact with the protocol and giving them the ability to interoperate with Zcash. I think that's super interesting. I think a future state where that exists, I prefer just doing it, figuring out a way to just have Zcash solely be a protocol that focuses on like execution and user experience and building applications that are useful, and then offloading block production, the storing of data, and even potentially proving the current state of the network to other entities. So that's kind of where like my head lies right now. Mm-hmm. And I think tying that back to what I was talking about earlier is if you look at the legacy of Zcash, if you make this type of pivot, whether you do it via something called an L2 or a layer 1 protocol that's interoperable with other layer 1 protocols via some bridging mechanism, you create an opportunity for Zcash to be used in different use cases that other users might be interested in using. So for example, I remember my first Zcash conference, it was permissionless in Florida. It was 2 years ago. And I talked to the people at some big DeFi protocol, and they said the minute you can add shielded ETH and shielded Bitcoin to Zcash, I will store some there and I will interact with it. If you can create secure bridging with Ethereum. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So like, how do we do that? And then again, like, where are people on Ethereum interacting with Ethereum right now? Are they interacting on the L1 or are they interacting on Arbitrum? So like, if you want Zcash to interact with Ethereum, do you build it on the L1 like Railgun did, or do you build it on the L2? Do you build it as an application? Do you build it as a protocol? Do you build it as a layer 1 and take a bet on another ecosystem? Like, these are conversations we need to have. And I just feel like as a community, we just like, we're not expressing somewhat of like our opinions and saying, hey, like, I'm questioning this. Like, is this assumption wrong? Like, is everything I said just wrong? Like, is assuming that Zcash doesn't need to be a layer 1? Is that incorrect? Like, I feel the future of Zcash and understanding where it can lie in the ecosystem, we need to evaluate what is the value of Zcash and how can it provide value where all the activity is, versus trying to abstract the value and activity away from other ecosystems back to Zcash. We've tried that. That hasn't worked. So how can we go to the other ecosystems and say, you know what, we'd like to play in your environment now. How can we add value there? So that's kind of like my shill and my pitch.
Yeah, that could definitely be a very strong way forward. And another thought I had, just, you know, this the brainstorming all the awesome ways Zcash could flourish in the future. Let me hit this a little over a minute long clip from the lead developer of Litecoin real quick. There we go.
And there's some that are better for like scaling for transaction sizes and stuff like Zcash, but Zcash comes with incredible complexity at a protocol level. You know, the 12 scientists or whatever in the world that can understand it, you know, let's put a lot of faith in them. Yeah,
I've been using Zcash pretty heavily over the last year or so, and there's been some wallet challenges, to say the least. They always have challenges just due to what they did was pretty groundbreaking. I mean, it's impressive stuff. I love the Zcash team. They've really pushed the privacy space forward in the terms of what's possible. But I don't know that for my daily money I want to use like the cutting edge, like this is the latest research, crypto, whatever. It just seems a little risky to have at least your net worth wrapped up in it. But
yeah, they are doing some really cool stuff. But definitely, like I said, the complexity is unreal, and trying to audit that kind of thing is not easy.
All right, so that was David Burkett of Litecoin. I interviewed recently, talking about Mibblewimble or MWeb on Litecoin and stuff, and he said some interesting stuff about Zcash, but basically just said it's like really incredible stuff. What they've been built, it's like 6 people who know how to do it right or whatever.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable with the Zcash development teams, whether it's with Frost, whether it's with Zebra, whether it's with the protocol Zcash itself, whether it's with these various proving systems. It's incredible what they've done. It's insane.
Yeah. So I guess my sort of parting thought on this whole thing, we talked about like the Zcash first approach to getting the value back into the actual keeping the value in the Zodler ecosystem, let's just say, right? Of like, actually push it, make it eat Monero's lunch, basically. Like go for that. Or make it like a transaction layer for a stablecoin or like a Bitcoin denominated asset. We talked about that. We talked about the other end of the spectrum, which is it kind of powers a whole bunch of other chains that do this kind of stuff. And then there's sort of I would say like a middle aspect thing. So talk about like funding models and economics and stuff. ECC and the foundation stuff, they get paid by Zcash holders, by Zodlers, right? That's where, because there's...
Well, I will say with a caveat is that ECC might implicitly agree with that, and I think that's good. Zcash Foundation does not agree with that at all.
They don't think they get paid?
So they think they get paid by the protocol. They don't think they get paid by like Zcash holders.
Well, I mean, potato, but they... I don't want to get into that. Listen, I sense there's a source of drama here. We've started enough already. We've already got rage tweets, so we don't want to get any more. But the point is they're paid and expected to return value for the network. They have definitely produced value in terms of like if the bleeding edge Zcash tech was not built, there would be much less value in the ZEC token than there is today, and much less usage, I think. But here's an interesting idea, right? What if ECC, let's just say, or whoever is doing most, like all the development of this kind of cool, awesome stuff, what if they are not entirely funded by the Zcash protocol? What if they're partially funded by the Zcash protocol, but partially funded by other projects? And the idea from this is they're like a dev team for hire, sort of, like, because right now they build open source tech or BOSOL tech or whatever, see how long that lasts. But the point is they build tech, and then other projects who benefit from that tech copy paste the code and then have to do their own work, like figuring out how to make it work and stuff with their use case. What if we served everyone's uses, said, hey, other protocol, pay us, we're the experts in this. We will help you build Zcash tech into your protocol. The benefit is Zcash gets the tech first. Zcash gets, like the ECC and all them, they build out the tech. It ends up on the Zcash chain, the transaction, the digital cash chain first, but then they also get paid by other people. And so not only are they making everyone's life easier and making the technology go better, they're taking less pressure. They're taking pressure off of Zodlers, right, to fund this development, and they're getting that money in, and then there's extra Zodler money, I guess, available to then do stuff to make the Zcash chain itself actually used for, something other than testnet style purposes. Like, so it's kind of like a win-win, right? And so, for example, Mibblewimble, as pioneered by Grin and Beam. Well, Beam came out first, I think, but it's whatever. Beam's doing some interesting stuff, but I won't go in that's completely off topic for this. But Grin didn't go anywhere, let's just put it mildly. And then Burkett and the other folks at Litecoin modified the Mibblewimble protocol to make it better and implemented it as an extension block in Litecoin. And then now, guess what? You got privacy on Litecoin. And the point is, why couldn't those devs help bring it to Litecoin sooner and get paid for it? Analogy, what happens if someone wants, let's just say Bitcoin Cash wants to do a shielded ZEC style extension block in BCH, and they want to soft fork that in, and they don't know where to start because it's such complicated stuff. Why don't they start a flip starter, get a big pot of money, pay ECC to help them out with that? The technology is already in Zcash first, but then you actually get funded in a dual kind of a way. Therefore, the Zcash technology keeps getting the people who are benefiting from it, which is not Zodlers today, not largely. It's other protocols. They actually are paying. And then
so
now it ends up being like everyone who's using it is paying, but it still is a Zcash first sort of ecosystem. And
this is
give like a 2 to 3 minute thing on this, and then we have to start wrapping this up.
I think that's a bad example, actually, because if you look at open source licenses like Basel, it's actually inhibited other protocols' ability to opt into a trustless Zcash style payment protocol. So they either opt for Sapling or they either opt for adopting Halo to their own specific use case, which is what DarkFi and potentially Monero would do. So you kind of have this ecosystem of like creating ECC as a for hire dev shop. I think doesn't decrease the sell pressure that much. You still have 80% of the reward going to miners. I think a more interesting thing is experimenting with either another proof of work algorithm, which I don't know if people would be up for, or moving to proof of stake, even though I'm not a fan of proof of stake. I've said that publicly. I've said that at ECC. I'm less of a hater now than I used to be, but I still prefer proof of work, and I prefer to transact with proof of work chains and interact with them. But you could use a proof of stake consensus algorithm, decrease the sell pressure on ZEC, and you could define what is that consensus algorithm? What does that protocol do? Is it responsible for the entirety of the Zcash protocol? Is that what the ZEC token is for, securing the entirety? Or is it securing, for example, the sole role of ordering and including transactions in specific blocks that are then taken to another entity that proposes that state update to another blockchain? Or like, is it a proof of stake coin that is interacting with another ecosystem? So if you have that aspect, you can decrease the sell pressure. The other aspect is being able to make the ZEC token a gas token for all of these different private on-chain swaps or private on-chain transactions or private on-chain store value, whether that be with the stablecoin, BTC, etc. That can provide utility to the ZEC token if you interact it with another ecosystem that doesn't have a 21 million store value like Bitcoin. Then potentially, because of the 21 million supply cap of Zcash, you can be the censorship resistant store value that doesn't have long-term inflation tied to it. If you aren't able to figure out a way to pay for network security in terms of adding more value accrual to the network, then you'll have to implement inflation. So it's figuring out how you can position Zcash within the next 12 months to interact with another ecosystem, add more value accrual to that ZEC the tokens, decrease sell pressure, and provide more use cases that allow people to transact privacy with their preferred asset, but use ZEC as the gas token, which provides more value, provides more utility, and doing that in a way where you can focus developers solely on providing that user experience and developer experience of building applications and integrations versus having to construct and bootstrap an entire layer one consensus. Or you could do a layer one consensus and just integrate it with another ecosystem that has better and improved interoperability.
Lots of great ideas.
That's the shill, right? Like that's the idea. And as a community, can we research these ideas? Can we post these ideas in the forum? And can we say what's been happening over the last X amount of years is not working?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously, just to wrap this thing up really quick, because I do have to take off, Zcash has had a pretty incredible legacy of building the best tech. And I still think, maybe I'm naive, I don't see a world where in 5 years from now, there is no such thing anymore, kind of thing. It's like in the dustbin. I think that I think sooner or later, people are going to figure out how to make this thing work. That's one thing that surprised me about the Zcash ecosystem is it seems quiet and small, but there's so many people who have at some point interacted with, at some point worked with, at some point invested, at some point whatever. And they're just everywhere, it's all spread out, but there's a massive amount of people who believe in the future of this tech. And I think that believing in the concept is a great first start. The next step, which is already achieved, has been building some kick-ass shit. That has also happened, which is like not guaranteed, right? Like, I mean, Lightning Network 18 months later, whatever, right? There's a lot of like theory to execution. There's that. And then there's a few things that haven't yet panned out, but I think we can fix those, is my point.
But my last point is theory to execution. The Zcash chain wasn't usable for an entire year.
Yeah.
And it took an independent wallet developer to provide people the user experience that they expected with Zcash. So
yes,
I'd say, is it theory or is it execution? And I'd say, let's continue this conversation in the forums and let's really start having a debate. I don't want Zcash to just fade away, but we're going to have to, as people who might not be as financially or motivated, financially motivated, or even motivated from just an energy perspective, like these conversations need to happen, or I predict in the next 5 years Zcash will exist, but it will not be discussed.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic podcast. Thanks very much, Ian. I think that this is exactly what we needed to wrap up the whole picture. 12 episodes strong. This concludes this season of Zcash Podcast. It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for the minor grants for funding this thing. It's been a fantastic exploration. It's made me it's really turned me on to Zcash's tech and zero knowledge proofs and all that in a way I would not have otherwise done. And I'll continue to be, a Zcash fan at heart, for a very long time, if not more. And I think that the brightest days of this technology is it's just not controversial, really. You're far ahead of it. Like as far as like Zcash itself, I know that the awesome stuff that the team has built so far will be compounded on and will continue on, and more cool stuff will be built. So
100%.
I'm extremely optimistic, because the people who built this, who set out to build something awesome, built something awesome, and I think will continue to build something awesome, and will continue to have a lasting impact on the future of the human race. And I'm extremely grateful to be here at this moment in time to participate in this and document this and broadcast it to the world. Thanks everyone for watching. It's been a pleasure. Subscribe to the channel if you want to watch other stuff that happens. Thanks very much, Ian, at Ian Sagstetter without the R on Twitter.
Without the R, yeah.
Follow this glorious bastard. And remember, your phone is spying on you. Everything's spying on you. Encrypt before it's too late. See you guys around. Bye-bye.